So, our goal really for this session today is to give you a practical look at what it actually takes to build adaptive learning experiences using generative AI. So, we're going to showcase some of our current AI capabilities, explore some real-world project architecture, and also share what we've learned from building these systems for enterprise teams. So, a quick word about SweetRush for those of you who may be newer to us. We were founded in 2001 and have been a really strong player in the L&D industry for the past 25 years. So, just this January, we joined the NIIT family of world-class learning services. Some of the things we love to do are strategic consulting to help clients positively impact their businesses through L&D, creating engaging, effective, and innovative custom learning solutions that often leverage exciting technologies like virtual and augmented reality, gamification, and of course, the topic of today's webinar, Gen AI. We also have an extensive network of high-performing L&D professionals and subject matter experts, and we love sharing the wealth through our talent agency. And last but not least, it has been an honor to receive numerous industry awards for the solutions that we develop with our amazing client partners, some of which we'll be showcasing today. So, by way of introduction, I'm Danielle Silver. I'm a solution architect here at SweetRush, where I've been for nearly 6 years. My background spans instructional design, learning strategy, and immersive technology. What I love most about being a solution architect is that really I'm in the field connecting with clients like you every single day. So I get to hear directly from learning leaders, and that gives me an incredible front row seat to the top trends and the real world concerns that are facing L&D. So when it comes to AI in particular, I hear the excitement and the huge opportunities that you're seeing, but I also hear the very real constraints, the anxieties, and the budget questions that you're navigating. And I'm really excited to dive into all of that with you today. And I'll hand over to Adrian to introduce himself.
Thanks, Danny. I'm Adrian Soto. I've been with SweetRush for over 9 years now, spending most of that time in the world of extended reality as Director of Immersive Technologies. But a couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to start working with AI and eventually was assigned the role of Director of AI Strategy. And I'm happy to be here today sharing some of that work we've done.
All right. So, as we all know, AI is making adaptive learning possible at a scale that we've never seen before. But what does it actually take to build it? Today, we're going to unpack the three foundational keys to making adaptive AI work in the real world. So first, real-time content generation. We're going to explore what it looks like and takes for AI to generate hyper-relevant content on the fly, tailored to each learner's specific context. And more importantly, where and how we must anchor that content in verified, trustworthy sources. Second, AI coaching and practice. We'll show you how to use it for active mentorship, guiding real practice, asking diagnostic questions, giving immediate feedback, and all while keeping the human instructional design firmly in control behind the scenes. And third is token and server economics. This is a brand new space. We're all navigating this landscape together. But we wanted to show you how we at SweetRush are evaluating some of these costs and how we plan for token usage when scoping enterprise projects. So whether you're just beginning to explore or you're already prototyping, we hope today inspires you with some new possibilities and gives you a practical framework for where to go next. So to understand why adaptive AI is such a profound shift, it helps to look at how learning evolved across four distinct eras. So firstly, the era of apprenticeship. For most of human history, learning was personal, it was immediate. Think of a master guiding an apprentice, teaching them to craft a tool or to hunt. It relied on scaffolding and fading. So the master holds your hand today, then steps back as you gain skill tomorrow. It was incredibly effective because the content was your life, but it did have a huge flaw in that it couldn't scale. Then we move into the era of standardization. So with the Industrial Revolution, it forced us into the classroom out of sheer necessity. We had to train the masses with limited resources, and so we adopted a one-size-fits-all model. We gained that reach, but we lost the individual scaffolding and started teaching to the middle of the room. And this is not new to most of you here, I'm sure. So, moving into the era of digital disruption. So, over the last 20 years or so, we moved that classroom to a screen. So, the SCORM era meant that we could reach almost every employee on Earth instantly, but the content itself remained generic. So, we gave learners a digital library, but we didn't necessarily give them a mentor. And then that brings us to today, which is the era of adaptive design. So generative AI is allowing us to close that loop. We can finally reclaim the personal touch of the original apprenticeship while keeping the infinite reach of the digital era. So we're able to now provide that scaffolding when a learner struggles and fade away as they master a skill. So we're finally back to teaching the one, but now at the scale of the many, which is really exciting. So moving on to the next slide, before we dive in, just level set on how we define adaptive learning. We look at it very broadly as an umbrella term for any training that is not one size fits all. So think about it this way: a book, a video, a click next to continue e-learning module, those are not adaptive because person X and person Y have the exact same experience. But the moment the training responds to the individual, then it becomes adaptive. So at a very foundational level, adaptive learning starts with accessibility and learner preference. If person X chooses to read a transcript while person Y watches the video, or let's say if the system adjusts its interface to meet a learner's neurodiverse needs, that is adaptive. It's an experience that respects the learner's agency and their unique way of processing information. Beyond preferences, we've historically created adaptive learning experiences through human-led logic. So these are test outs that respect what you already know and branching scenarios where your choices actually change your destination. So these are really powerful tools, but they are manual. We have to pre-program every branch and every if-then statement. So that brings us now to, sorry, previous screen, Lucy, where the umbrella expands. So with AI, we're moving beyond the pre-programmed playground into a world where AI is able to make that adaptation happen in real time. So take dynamic content, for example. Instead of us writing 10 versions of a case study, the AI generates the most relevant version for that specific learner. We see this with conversational AI, where we move from a static correct, incorrect box to a one-to-one virtual discussion with an AI coach. We're even moving into true learning in the flow of work. So imagine an AI watching you as you build a slide deck or a piece of code, stepping in to remediate a mistake exactly when it happens. The goal here is the same as it was in the apprenticeship era, to give the learner all of the training that they need and only the training that they need. And that takes us to our first key, which is real-time content generation from learner context. So this is where we move beyond static one-size-fits-all training to make learning truly adaptive. So the AI engine here really needs to understand who's sitting in front of it. It needs to be able to read their unique context and then to generate tailored content on the fly. So let's have a look at how we structure that architecture. We're very excited to introduce you to our dynamic content generator. Instead of forcing every employee down the exact same linear track, this approach transforms a fixed curriculum into a responsive learning ecosystem. Rather than waiting for a learner to struggle or to fail an assessment, the system identifies those knowledge gaps in real time. It then dynamically adjusts the scaffolding and the depth of the content to meet the learner where they are before they even realize that they need the extra support. We'll talk more about this later, but it's also important to point out that what we're going to show you is a governed process. It's not an open-ended chatbot. So every scenario, every explanation that the AI generates is anchored strictly in your organization's proprietary source of truth. We're making sure that we have complete technical accuracy, regulatory compliance, and of course, brand alignment. So to see this in action, let's look at a case study that's focused on retirement planning. It is a topic where standard static modules almost always fall flat because an employee's needs depend entirely on their age, their location, and even their career stage. So take the two learners on screen here. Sarah, a 30-year-old early career employee in Illinois, and Marcus, a 55-year-old senior leader in California. A single static course cannot effectively serve them both. By anchoring our AI engines strictly in verified corporate benefits, in IRS codes, and state-level guidelines, the system then generates real-time scenarios tailored to each of these learners' specific horizons. So Sarah is going to get focused guidance on early wealth accumulation, while Marcus might receive dynamic calculations around exit strategies and tax considerations. So, how do we actually power these two completely different experiences for Sarah and Marcus inside the same course? Let's look at the underlying architecture here on the screen. So, instead of a rigid, linear click next module, we move to a modular assembly model. So, notice that we're not throwing out static content entirely. The core baseline information still lives in stable human written slides. But where standard delivery falls short, we're now injecting dynamic adaptive content blocks. So this is where those real-time AI-generated components come in, and they're tailored to that specific learner's profile. This hybrid approach is also how we remain extremely intentional about token consumption. And we'll talk more about this later, but we're not wasting server costs or LLM calls by regenerating baseline content that the static human written slides already handle best. Instead, we call the AI only for the key parts of the course where personalization truly moves the needle. So let's look at the full architecture, and then I'll hand it over to Adrian, who can show you some features of the course. But the experience begins with an upfront diagnostic. So here we're capturing immediate context, like age, role, location. These are all vital for retirement planning. From there, the learner moves through human-written core slides. As they progress, the AI runs continuous knowledge tracing in the background, measuring their understanding and refining its context. At targeted intervals, the system dynamically injects an AI block. Depending on what the learner needs at that moment, the AI generates a custom case study, a tailored reading, or even a quick quiz. The transition here is completely seamless. The learner moves from static human-written slides into those hyper-relevant AI components and back again without even feeling any break in the experience. And so with that, I'll hand it over to Adrian.
Thanks, Danny. So first off, we acknowledge that when working with AI, there is always a concern of data privacy, both from the company and the learner. Even though in this project, sensitive information does not leave the learner's computer, we recognize the concern by offering the possibility of opting out of AI-generated content. By selecting no tracking, the learner can take the course in its fallback non-AI version. As mentioned, we start a course collecting information from the learner that can later be used to create slides that feel tailor-made to them. Here, collecting demographic information and asking some knowledge questions up front allows us to present information in a more relatable way. Later, along the course path, we have AI modules that will create case studies, specific examples, and even tests that meet the learner where they are. The learner won't even know that the content they're interacting with was created by AI in real time to better help them achieve the overall learning objective. This might feel familiar. We have done this before as branching content, where depending on how a learner responds, we can go either in one direction or the other. The main difference is that when we're working with branching content, all content must be created before the course. So there are limitations on the assumptions that we can make, and obviously there is a challenge on how many branches we can actually have. the key point here is that we can use AI in real time to create slides for us based on guidelines we provide.
All right, so that brings us to our second key, which is AI-powered coach and mentor interactions. And just to note, I see some Q&A in the chat. We'll leave plenty of time at the end to answer all of them, but I know in the meantime, Adrian will be checking in to see if there are any he can answer in the meantime. So up until now, we've focused on the content side of things with the dynamic content generator that Adrian just showcased. But delivering personalized information is really only half of the battle. To drive true behavior change, we have to give learners an opportunity to practice their skills. This is where we enter the performance sandbox, which is our framework for high-impact simulations, real-time coaching, and Socratic reflection. Because information alone does not build capability, we all know that practice does. In this section, we'll look at how we design AI models to move from delivering content to provided opportunities for guided, active practice. So as we look at building true mentorship into adaptive learning, we have to solve for two primary challenges. First is a challenge as old as L&D itself, the application gap. Traditional enterprise training delivers theory effectively, but it often hits a wall when it comes to execution, leaving employees without a safe environment to practice before high-stakes situations. And second is a much newer risk. This is what we're calling the AI crutch. So when you introduce AI into learning, users can lean on it as an easy button, so to speak. They prompt the model for quick outputs, borrowing the AI's intelligence instead of developing their own critical thinking skills. I know I'm guilty of this, and I'm sure many of us here as well. Quick wins, AI gives us what we need in the moment, but isn't really helping us build those skills. So how do we bridge the application gap without creating that AI crutch? Our answer to this is the practice sandbox. It's an environment engineered specifically to force critical thinking rather than simple answer retrieval. And we build this around three core learning mechanisms. So first, instructional friction. We program intentional constraints into the system. Instead of handing over immediate solutions, the AI deliberately withholds the final answers to try to trigger the learner's own problem-solving process. Second is productive struggle. We place the user in a dynamic environment where they must reason through complex professional challenges, building true competence in a safe space. And third, active retrieval. The AI acts as a coach rather than a search engine. It asks diagnostic questions, it prompts the user to explain their logic, and it ensures that they're building real, lasting muscle memory. So the architecture on the next screen here helps to bring everything together. This combines the dynamic content generator that we showed previously with now this new piece, which is the adaptive learning and practice framework. So here we get the best of both worlds. We're honoring those expert-led, brand-aligned human content, human-written slides rather, while augmenting it with personalized AI practice. So looking at the flow here on screen, the unified journey might look like this. We start with an upfront diagnostic that identifies who the learner is, their role, their background, what is their baseline knowledge. From there, the learner begins to move through expert-written static slides. Now they're establishing those core foundational concepts. The AI then injects a personalized case study, maybe an example or a reading, and it is tailored specifically to that learner and what it knows about them. The learner then returns to static policy and messaging slides to re-anchor in company standards. And finally, they enter the adaptive learning and practice block to apply everything that they've learned. Here, an AI coach guides them through realistic scenarios, providing feedback until they reach true mastery. So our goal here, by weaving all of these elements together, is that we're not just adding AI to a course, we're creating a seamless, data-driven journey that ensures that every minute spent learning is high impact, relevant, and of course, verified. So to see this in action, we're going to look at a case study that's currently in development for a global biopharmaceutical organization. Their mission was to move global sales and marketing teams beyond basic AI awareness and into strategic workflow application. So to get them there, we are building a practice engine that is centered around three Socratic milestones. The first foundational milestone is to apply the company's core AI framework to their daily tasks. Milestone two then becomes more contextual. So this is about anchoring AI in proprietary data, in market research, in creative briefs. And remember, this is specifically for sales and marketing executives. The third milestone is strategic. So here, learners need to simulate stakeholder personas to stress test strategic ideas before execution. Throughout these milestones, the AI strictly follows our Socratic rule. It never gives away the answer. It provides that scaffolding, it provides subtle hints, but it forces the learner to generate the correct reasoning themselves before moving forward. So we'll geek out a little bit here, but what's really cool about this project, and Adrian will show you how it all works in a moment, is that instead of building a single all-purpose AI system, we've engineered a specialized panel, if you will, of AI agents working together behind the scenes. So to the learner, it feels like a single, seamless conversation with one coach. But behind the scenes, every input or every answer that a learner inputs into the system is triggering a circular loop here. So the orchestrator is going to manage the session. That's the agent that is tracking the learner's milestone progress. The evaluator is analyzing the learner's input and their response, and it's going to start pinpointing gaps or mistakes in their logic. The strategist makes the pedagogical decision. So they're determining whether to offer a nudge, a hint, or to unlock the milestone. And lastly, the coach takes that strategy and delivers the supportive response that the learner sees on screen. So with that, I'll hand it back over to Adrian to talk a little bit more about this course, keeping in mind, though, that this project is actively in development. So you'll be seeing an early preview as we continue to refine and iterate the system. So Adrian, over to you.
Thanks, Sunny. I'm all caught up with the questions, but they were so good. I wonder if we should have left them for the end. Well, we'll see.
We can
So,
reshare them at the end so that
yeah,
everyone gets to hear the answers.
and Casey had
Mhm.
an interesting observation that we could debate on.
Hmm.
So in this project, the learner is progressing at their own pace, and then eventually they get to the coach. You can see that from the learner's perspective. It looks like a traditional chatbot, but as Danny mentioned, what happens behind the scenes is much more powerful. So let's see if we get this to work. Okay. Yes, what you're seeing here is an educational guide we put together into how the trainer works. So there are three sections here. The first one to your left is the designer. So again, we put this together just so people can see how it works. But the first on your left is the designer. We use this to make small corrections and guide the trainer to achieve the results we want. So think of it like a light version of context engineering. The middle one is the most important one. We call it the tiny teacher. And this is what the learner actually interacts with. This is the actual output that goes into the chatbot. This part is what you would see as a learner in your computer, branded, of course, according to any visual requirements. And then the right panel is a glimpse of our agents doing their work. So we color-coded them so it's easier for you guys to see how they interact with each other. So here we go, play. The trainer is asking the learner, how often do you use Copilot in your marketing work? You can see how the committer agent in yellow on the right panel is ready to handle the data from the learner's response. The learner answers daily, and the orchestration agent in purple is taking the response and calling the rest of the agents to do their work. You don't then see the evaluator agent in green analyzing the answer, which is sent to the strategy agent in orange and eventually sent to the coach agent in pink. with the information already processed so it can figure out the best way to move forward with the response. In this case, the coach wanted more information before continuing, so it tells the orchestrator to collect additional information. The orchestrator asks, what do you do when Copilot gives a generic response? Oh, okay, it doesn't matter. This process is repeated in a structured way based on guidelines provided by the learning architect. Also remember that the interaction between the agents happen almost instantly. We slowed it down so you guys can see it work. Back to you, then.
All right. So I see a lot of questions in the chat about data and how we make this happen. So it's a good segue into the next section here. So to really create these kinds of experiences and to move beyond a basic chatbot and into a true AI coach, we have to feed the engine several distinct streams of data. So as you see here, true personalization really is the result of layering what we know about a learner, what we know about their progress and where they're at in their learning journey, and of course, the organizational truth. This is how we ensure that the AI delivers context-aware, hyper-relevant coaching instead of just generic responses. So we're going to look at four different streams of data that we can input into the experience on the next slide. And when these intersect, that's really the sweet spot of true adaptive learning. So the first pillar is, of course, learner insights. We're looking at data points like job role, seniority, experience level. The outcome here is that the experience needs to feel personal. It makes sure that the AI understands who's on the other side of the screen, adapting the language and the examples so that they feel specifically relevant to that person. Next is knowledge tracing. So this looks at past assessment performance. It looks at time spent on task and identified skill gaps. So the outcome here is that the experience feels efficient. It allows the system to act like a GPS, automatically skipping what is already known and doubling down exactly where the learner is struggling. The third pillar is the knowledge base. So this pulls from company playbooks, from brand voice guidelines, from proprietary content, methodologies, frameworks. The outcome here is that the experience is accurate. This is your source of truth. It's what prevents AI hallucinations, and it keeps the coach's advice strictly grounded in your specific business rules. And finally, we have the potential to integrate external ecosystems. So this might pull data from HR performance reviews, maybe project management metrics. The outcome here is that the experience feels relevant. It allows the AI to suggest a learning moment, not because it was assigned, but because the real-world performance data suggests a need for it right now. So once we gather those data streams about the learner and the organization, the next question is, how do we actually operationalize them inside the model? Large language models give us an incredible processing base, but in their default state, foundational models are just far too generic. So we're able to bridge that gap through context engineering, which isn't just about writing a good prompt. It's about building a multi-layered framework that the AI uses to truly understand the learner's world. So first, perspective. We need to engineer a coach persona. It's not just about outputting information. It's about shaping a relationship. We can tune the AI to act as a patient guide for a new hire or as a rigorous peer-level advisor for a senior VP, adjusting the tone, the role, and the seniority level accordingly. The next pillar is the content. So we need to anchor the AI directly in the organization's proprietary content, their frameworks, and methodologies. This ensures that the model isn't pulling random advice off of the internet, but it is teaching strictly from your internal playbook. And lastly, the constraints. So these are our guardrails. By setting explicit benchmarks of maybe gold standards or what is a good response versus a bad response, we're allowing the AI to self-correct and to maintain the high safety and quality standards of your brand. I'm going to hand over to Adrian, who I think on the next slide is going to speak to that in a little bit more detail because that is a really important part of this whole exercise, and it's a question that I get asked a lot.
Thanks, Sunny. When you build an ecosystem like this for a global enterprise, the immediate questions are always about security, accuracy, and brand alignment. We solve this through a layered security and design approach. First, we use retrieval augmented generation to ground the engine. The system is locked into a specific verified knowledge layer with company policies and educational frameworks. Second, safety is structural. Because the input passes through those separate agents, the system checks for scope violations and disruptive behavior before a single word is ever generated back to the user. Third, we're provider agnostic, so this means that we can choose what AI foundational model to use based on course objectives and learning design requirements. And most importantly, this system is AI augmented but human perfected. The AI brings the incredible scale and the real-time adaptation, but SweetRush learning experts are the ones who design the blueprints, author the rubrics, and map the milestones. For the foundation of all of this, and there are a couple of questions related to this, we're looking into two institutions that provide guidelines and frameworks to follow. This will help us standardize a responsible approach to data handling when it comes to AI. NIST and ISO 42001 have the ultimate rules of the road for keeping user data safe when building AI. In fact, NIIT, our parent company, is already ISO certified regarding their AI processes. So instead of just checking compliance boxes, these frameworks push companies to actively think about data privacy from day one. NIST gives teams a practical playbook to sniff out where user data might get exposed, corrupted, or biased, and tells them exactly how to fix it. On the flip side, ISO 42001 is like getting a gold star certification for your AI setup. It forces company to track exactly where their training data comes from, strip out personal information so users can be identified, and assign clear owners so nothing falls through the cracks. Put them together and they keep AI projects from turning into a privacy nightmare. Okay, so up to this point, we've talked about what adaptive AI can do instructionally, how it personalizes content and drives active practice. But none of that matters if the architecture isn't financially stable at scale. Let's take a look at the third key to building adaptive courses and everyone's least favorite component, the economics of AI costs. In traditional e-learning, you have a one-time cost of content. You build a course, you put it into an LMS, and whether 10 people or 10,000 people take it, that distribution of costs is functionally flat. With generative AI, that rule is broken. There is now a cost of running it. Every single conversation, every single word typed, and every single background agent check consumes tokens and server infrastructure. To take content from a cool prototype to a global reality, we need to focus on at least these areas. Tokens, the first one, are words AI reads and writes, and each one costs a little. Multiply that across thousands of learners, and it becomes a real budget line. Efficient design here is key to keep this in check. The people, the cost that's difficult to put on the pricing page, someone has to design the adaptive logic, write the prompts, and maintain it all after it's released. It's not AI doing everything. People are doing a lot of the work, almost most of it. This is where the magic happens. AI doesn't design great learning, you do. This also includes upskilling your team to work with AI. Infrastructure, AI needs somewhere to live and think, and most of us rent that power through the cloud. However, there are regulated industries that may need their own servers. Either way, this is also something that needs to be considered. And of course, license and governance. The software stack around AI and authoring tools and delivery platforms, provider subscriptions, all of that. Keep in mind, this all stacks up quietly. Also, when AI makes decisions about learner, someone has to make sure those decisions are fair, they're accurate, and they are safe. This is not a very glamorous part, but it's what separates experimenting with AI from using it responsibly. Done.
All right, so on the topic of responsible AI usage, I'll shift us now to the topic of trust. So as we look to the future of adaptive learning, we at SweetRush, we don't pretend to have every single answer. As we all know, this space is evolving rapidly, and we're all establishing the rules of the road together, rather. So what we do know is that trust is the absolute foundation of everything that we've shown you today. As we continue to discover what's possible, we're looking at three core values that guide how we think about and how we protect learner data. So first, we're exploring the concept of autonomy. We believe that adaptive learning should ideally be a choice, not a mandate. So one approach we're considering is always offering a standard track. If a learner isn't comfortable with the system using their data to generate that content, maybe they should have the option to opt out and instead complete a high quality, non-adaptive version of the course. We want personalization to feel like an invited guest, not an intruder. So if you think back to the first case study that we showed you, where on the opening slide, learners have a choice about whether they want to complete the more standard traditional e-learning module, or if they're happy to use their data to generate content for a more adaptive experience. Second here is transparency. We want to move away from the black box feel of AI. We're thinking about how we can give learners the opportunity to see exactly what information was collected and how it was used to help them. So for example, a summary might show them that because they identified as a team lead, the AI adjusted the scenarios to focus on conflict resolution. By showing the why behind the what, we can transform data collection into a visible, helpful partnership. And finally, we believe in sovereignty. So we're leaning into the idea that once a learning journey is over, the learner should have the final word on their data. So we want to provide opportunities for them to reset or to delete their personalized profile. This ensures they remain the owners of their digital footprint, giving them the confidence to engage fully with the AI, knowing that they are in control of their own data. These principles are our starting point. They ensure that as we push the boundaries of what AI can do, we never lose sight of the human at the center of the experience. So to bring our entire discussion together, let's revisit the three keys for building scalable, enterprise-ready adaptive AI. The first key, real-time content generation. Adaptive learning starts by generating hyper-relevant content on the fly. We're balancing the learner's specific context with strict grounding in verified internal sources. The second key is AI-powered coaching and practice. So here, the real capability comes from moving past passive content delivery to hands-on practice using Socratic AI mentors guided by, of course, human instructional design. And the third and final key is economic sustainability. So a system is only viable if it scales affordably. By actively managing token usage, prompt design, and smart model routing, we're able to build predictable, enterprise-ready budget envelopes. So when you align these three pillars, we hope you'll be able to unlock adaptive experiences that are engaging, instructionally sound, and financially sustainable. And to wrap up here, before we open up the floor for Q&A, I want to return to a foundational principle for everyone here at SweetRush, and that is that AI is a tool to augment human intelligence, not replace it. Building impactful AI-powered learning requires an even tighter harmony across our internal design teams than before. It takes our learning experience designers to engineer the context. It takes our developers to engineer the environments and to make sure that they're secure and robust. It takes our creatives to make the experience feel human and our UX specialists to ensure that the technology never gets in the way of the learning. Our value moving forward does not come from trying to compete with AI. It comes from our unique ability to direct it, to refine it, and to ground it in the human experience. And so, with that, I would like to thank you again for sharing your time with us today. I know we are all super busy and moving a million miles an hour. But with that, I'd love to open up the floor to any questions you might have, thoughts, feedback, curiosities.
Yes, thank you both for this presentation. It was very interesting. We have lots of questions. I see Adrian was already in there answering some. I'm going to try and pull a few out that maybe already have a response, but I think would be good to touch on again. So one question is about content generation. Is the content AI generated, or does the user enter information about different scenarios and the system pulls the appropriate content based on what is entered? Could you talk a bit more about the content and the generation and all of that?
Yeah, of course. I think that might have been one that Adrian started to answer in the
Yes.
chat. If you want to share your response with a wider group.
Yes. Which one was it? I was reading
So that was the
Brittany's
question
question.
around whether all of the content is fully AI generated or
Oh,
whether
yeah.
it's pulling from scenarios that the learners are kind of inputting themselves.
No, that's where um, the power of Gen AI comes into play. So it takes the insights we provide, and someone asked if those insights can come from external sources. So yes, they can. So we gather those insights. They come into the RAG or the context engineering part where we have the guidelines on what to do with those. We have the information of the course. We have all the learning designer work, and then Gen AI takes all of that and creates the slide.
Awesome. Okay, we have so many questions, so
I can
I'm
get
gonna
to
just
that
keep.
the last one. I have an answer if you don't
Yeah,
mind.
yeah, go ahead.
So Brittany asks, have you worked with any clients whose AI policies require the use of specific LLM tools? The answer is yes. And since you brought up Copilot, the coach you saw was actually using Copilot to power it. So we run into clients that have their own AI instance. We've run into clients that have maybe 2 or 3 more AI models that we need to use. So because we are agnostic, we are able to sort of mix and match or adapt to the client's necessity. Also, if it's something that's running on premise because of I don't know security restrictions, that's also something we're able to do.
And that's something that we would work together with the client on in the early stages of the project to really understand what does their ecosystem look like, what are the AI tools that they're using. Everything that we built is very specific to the context of the learner and the organization. So if there's specific tools that you're using, we're going to want to use those tools so that we know that the learning objectives are being met. So the one that Adrian mentioned, we used Copilot because that's what our client was using. In another project, we use Claude, we've used ChatGPT. So it depends on the infrastructure, it depends on the client, it depends on what the tools are. Um, so absolutely, I think it's important to remain agnostic in this day and age where the tools are just evolving on a daily basis. Everything is changing. So being able to be nimble and jump between different tools and software is also really important.
Yes, that is the challenge these
Yeah.
days, isn't it? Yeah. So we have, so you talked in the chat a little bit evaluation, and we have another question asking about access to analytics on the learner's performance. Can you maybe combine these questions a little bit and talk about the evaluation and learner performance analytics? So the original
Yeah,
question on evaluation, which you did have a written response to, was just how to evaluate the learner performance and what parameters does the agent look at?
yeah. I think that's part of where learning designers shine, right? When they're in that stage of design, and thinking of, okay, what are the evaluation criteria? What are the guidelines? How do I navigate learners towards achieving the learning objectives? All of that is done by, uh, that's the human component of it. At the end, AI is executing. So evaluation is not an off-the-shelf thing. It's a planned, tailor-made layer of all the learning design.
And so
And I
I
forgot the
can,
other one.
oh, it was linked. It was evaluation and measurement in general. But
Okay,
if I can add some color to Adrian's answer in terms of the parameters, as an example, what parameters does your agent look at? We built a coaching simulation for leaders across a food and beverage organization, and that simulation was grounded in their coaching methodology, which is a common one across organizations, but that's the GROW framework, so GROW. And so we've built that into the back end of the prompt. And so learners get to come in, they get to engage with a potential employee, with an employee rather. They get to have a coaching scenario, and either that can be planned, maybe it's having a difficult moment, maybe that's giving an advice to someone. And their feedback is based on how well they applied that specific framework. So they're going to get specific feedback based on each of those parameters. So GROW. And so similarly, we would customize whatever the learning objective is that we're designing the practice simulation for, we would ground the feedback in that. And then, of course, the organization will get insight into how well the learners are applying those specific methodologies.
Awesome, wonderful. I'm going to keep going because we have so many
Yeah.
questions. The next question is, how does an organization protect proprietary data they want to use for training when using AI in the environment you are presenting? So if you want to read the question, it's a little bit higher up in the chat.
that's a good question. There are four components to that. There's the zero data retention necessity. There's do not train the model with my data necessity. There's data residency necessity. That's where data is stored geographically. And then the fourth one is specific nuances to our clients. Different tools can provide or comply with those requirements. So what we do is make sure that we have a full understanding of the IT security restrictions our clients have so that we can align to the correct tools and make sure we comply those. So there's like the sales process, of course, but then there's also this consultative approach we take with our clients, and we meet with their IT departments, we connect with their legal departments, and we make sure we are all in agreement and understanding of these security and concerns, so that when we're creating content and we're designing, we are using the tools that will comply with those regulations or requirements.
Awesome. And before I continue on the questions, just want to clarify for some people in the chat, we have added our speakers' correct LinkedIns to the chat. So if you want to connect, continue the conversation, Lucy is putting that in the chat so you can just directly click on those links and connect. And another clarifying question, we will be sending out the recording of this webinar so you'll be able to rewatch everything, all the awesomeness again. So our next question says, aside from completion and demonstration of understanding, what other organization metrics are you being asked to track? Maybe this is something that you've seen in the companies that you work with, some organization metrics that are important to them.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, I think in the coaching scenario, it's very custom depending on what the learning objective itself is. We're currently doing a lot of AI simulations, as you can imagine. It is a big topic of conversation for many organizations. So in the demo of the simulation that we showcased a little earlier, in something like that, organizations are wanting to see an increase in AI usage. So we're tracking those different milestones, and we're wanting to make sure that learners are actually using AI more in their jobs in the day-to-day roles as well. We've done other compliance courses where, we're wanting to track certain metrics related to risk or things, or what's the word that I'm looking for here? Um, but to make sure that, risk reduction is happening across the board and so forth. So it really depends on the topic area, on the content. These are very rich experiences in terms of data. And so we would want to connect with the client in the beginning analysis phase of the project to really understand what are the metrics that are going to move the needle. And then we're going to build those into the course itself so that they can start to track those components. But these certainly give us a whole lot more data than a typical click next to continue e-learning module or a simple quiz, because we're actually allowing learners to input their own responses. So we're getting to get a glimpse into their instinctive response in a given situation. So you're able to really assess true skill mastery here.
And then I'm curious, when building the AI module, does it take more time, instructional design time, than a traditional e-learning course, or could you talk a little bit about how the processes maybe differ?
Good question. It's actually very similar from a timing perspective, but the role shifts a little bit and changes. So we're moving away from as an instructional designer or a learning experience designer, we're moving away from having to write every single screen, write every single quiz into context engineering. So we're now, instead of writing the storyboard for a course, for example, we're writing the prompt that's sitting in the back end of the simulation. So we're writing the outlines of scenarios, we're writing the outlines of stories, we're identifying what are those metrics that we're needing to track, what is the methodology we're assessing against. So it's really a change and a shift in role, but in terms of the time and effort it takes to create the experience, it's pretty similar. So very much the learning experience designer still stays front and center.
And then I guess continue on that. Are there ways to optimize token costs down the line without degrading the quality of the coaching and the modules and stuff?
Yes, that's actually an interesting area we're exploring. It becomes like the secret sauce and asking the chef what's it made of. The different techniques. You actually saw one. Having different agents is a way of optimizing tokens. The way you use AI uses memory. If you want to shift between models, using less powerful models for simpler questions, for example. So there are ways, and this is something that's, I think of course us, but it's something that's very actively looked at in the industry.
Um,
I was just
yeah,
reading
go ahead.
Casey's question, Adrian. That's the one that you mentioned was an interesting point of debate.
Yeah.
So, is this going to cause a massive debacle regarding educational equality? So, students are no longer getting the same information or equal information. She gets the value, but imagining future lawsuits. And so, that's such an interesting call out. Not exactly a question, but I'd love to speak to it
Hmm.
a little bit.
Yeah,
So,
of course.
if you think back to the architecture we shared, this is why we think it's still really important to keep those human-written static slides. So we're not overhauling the entire experience and just generating the whole thing with AI. We're still very intentional about where we're using AI. So learners are still all getting the same foundational content. Where AI is coming in is it's making that content relatable and relevant to them specifically. So if I'm an engineering student or if I'm a healthcare student, it's just going to shift the case studies so that the content is relevant to me. So I hear the argument, and certainly if you're generating a whole course, then yes, that could become an issue. But that's really why we're trying to stay really intentional with the human written static slides as well. And those still have a very important place in learning.
That's great. Yeah, that was one of those. I love seeing when people are in the chat, like talking things back and forth. That's really awesome. So thank you for touching on that. We also had another like similar back and forth that was about I'm looking for it now, the like personal statements of learners to make sure that the learners do not use another agent or AI chat to interact with the content. Adrian, you had a nice answer here where it's not an off-the-shelf solution because you're custom content creators. But how would with the learners experience changing, how can we navigate this like competing AI module like with our content? Do you know what I'm trying to ask? Like how we can how learners or how we can help learners best navigate these competing AI agents when it comes to focusing on the content and focusing on your AI agent?
Well, the way we approach it is if the learner didn't even think it was AI generated or AI
Mm,
powered, that's great. They're focusing on what you want them to focus. Of course, there's going to be situations like the chat or the practice where it's pretty obvious. But again, it's like they're in that state where they're paying attention, they're being guided, everything is being presented to their capabilities, and it feels that it's being explained to them specifically.
thank you. It's been a really great chat. Everyone, thank you for sending in your questions and comments. If anyone has any last burning thoughts, we do have 2 more minutes before we are going to close out. Um, Thank you to Sweet Rush for answering the questions as they came in as well. Um, it's really great to see, people's questions get answered as soon as possible.
Yeah, I saw a
Um,
question
yeah.
about Rise. Is it articulate Rise used for the module? And yes, the first demo, the retirement planning module, was built in Rise. And I'm so happy that you noticed that, Nadia, because it's a tool that is notoriously difficult to customize. So the geeks in us are pretty excited to have been able to build out an adaptive learning module in Rise. And we think it just opens up a whole world of possibilities for these lower level kinds of learning experiences.
Awesome. Oh, good. You changed her opinion about Rise for the better, so that's awesome. We have a question about someone would love to see how you built that interaction. Maybe we'll have to have you back for a demo so that you can go through and explain how you built that. One question that just came in, how does this solution solve for application rather than knowledge transfer? And this is going to be our closeout question.
Sure. So the first part of the presentation, the retirement planning module, that's all about knowledge transfer. That's baseline content. That's getting you the foundational stuff that you need to know about retirement planning. The second one that we showcased, and because it's still in development, we didn't get to showcase more, so we'll have to come back. But that's all about the application. So there's scenarios built into that. You're a marketing and sales executive. This is a potential customer. How are you going to create a brief for them, for example? And the learner has to come in and actually use AI tools in order to solve for some of the challenges that we're presenting them. So there's a lot of practice built into that simulation. So hopefully we'll come back for a round two and we can showcase how that
Yeah.
project is coming to life.
Yes, we would love you to come back for round two. I just want to say thank you to you both for a wonderful presentation. Thank you to our audience for your active questions and comments. If you have more burning questions, you can reach out to our speakers. Their information is on the screen. You will also be receiving a recording of this webinar so you can come back and get all the knowledge again for a second time. Thank you, everybody, for joining and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks for having us.